Oh, connecting still. Mhm. Is she on Wi-Fi? Yep. Oh, yeah. Sometimes it takes a second. Okay. Which is typical.
Hi, everybody. I have one person watching. Hi, Robin Owens. Hi, everyone. Hi. We're doing something different today, my Substack people. It's Wednesday, July 16th, and we're trying something different because we're going to have a few guests. We're kind of doing this more like a show, and we're going to kind of get you up to date and up to speed on what's happening in the news. Hi, Minnesota. Hello, lunatic fringe. I love your handle. Um, and so we're gonna, as I said, try some different formats. We have some guests lined up, including David Boies, the lawyer that represented a lot the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, because no, everybody's talking about Jeffrey Epstein and this file and why the Justice Department has not released it. So I'm talking to Tim Miller from the Bulwark in a moment. And then I'm going to be talking to David Boies. But I thought we'd kind of quickly review some of the big stories of the week. I thought that might be helpful. Hello, Deb and Mary and Becky. I feel like Miss Connie from Romper Room. Do you remember that? Anyway, I'm a little sick, so I apologize for my voice. But let me tell you some of the news stories that I've been paying attention to. One is really disgusting. There are a lot of disgusting news stories happening these days, but I don't know if you all read the Trump administration is set to incinerate 500 tons of food. That's enough food to feed 1.5 million children for an entire week. The food they're incinerating are these high energy biscuits that are being stored in a warehouse in Dubai. They were intended to go to children in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And if there was excess, they could have also gone to other places. They would have worked with partners, perhaps sent them to Gaza. According to The Atlantic, which wrote a great story on this, they do such great journalism. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's now in charge of this since USAID, remember, was dismantled, he's continued to insist that the Trump administration embraces America's promise and responsibility to save foreign lives, including through food aid. Again, one USAID employee said the food could have met the nutritional needs of every child facing food insecurity in Gaza for a week. So, if you're wondering about the financials of all this, destroying the food will cost American taxpayers $130,000 on top of the $800,000 used to purchase the biscuits. So, so much for Marco Rubio's claim in May that he would ensure food aid would reach its intended recipients before spoiling. Anyway, I got to take a sip of tea, you guys, but I read about this last night and this morning, and I just find it so upsetting. It's just so counter to any kind of common sense and humanity. And speaking of humanity, I wanted to give you all an update about the terrible floods in Texas Hill Country. So 134 people have died, including 37 children, and at least 101 people are still missing. So I think a lot of people are asking, how could so many kids and counselors at Camp Mystic have been put in harm's way? So it's being reported that in 2011, FEMA had designated a lot of Camp Mystic's land as a high-risk flood zone, which would have required stricter building codes, flood insurance, and limited new construction. However, Camp Mystic challenged that ruling, and the high risk designation was actually overturned. So a few years later, the camp actually pursued an expansion, which added new cabins and buildings, some built in the very area that had been deemed a flood zone. One expert on FEMA's flood map seemed perplexed by the decision. And he told the New York Times, I think it's extremely troubling that it's a camp for children. You would think you'd want to be extra cautious, that you'd go beyond the minimum of what's required for flood protection. And we have also learned that FEMA had predicted that Kerr County, where Camp Mystic, of course, is located, and most of the deaths occur, was going to, quote, experience a flood event in the next year. And since 2017, local officials had tried at least 3 times to get money for a warning system, but they were turned down by the state of Texas. Now, after the flood, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said there, quote, should have been sirens here. If local officials could not afford it, he said, then the state will step up. I guess they didn't step up, and that's part of the problem. So there's still a lot of questions, you all, about preparedness, personnel, and how quick or slow the response was. So this story is not going to go away. And obviously, I think I speak on behalf of everyone watching. Our hearts go out to all those families who lost loved ones. It is just so, so tragic. And finally, the story we're going to really be focused on during this 45-minute period, if you guys are interested in staying with us, and I hope you do, is the Jeffrey Epstein story that I mentioned earlier. He may be dead, but this story will not die. Ever since Elon Musk tweeted last month that President Trump was named in the Epstein files, much of the MAGA base has been waiting, I mean, licking their chops to find out who was on this list and when the files would be released. But suddenly on July 7th, Pam Bondi, the attorney general, said there was no evidence disgraced that's hard to say, financier Jeffrey Epstein was murdered or had a client list. So the conspiracy theories are exploding. So Tim Miller, who's one of my favorite guests, he works at the Bulwark, and he had to take his kid to a guitar lesson, but he, I understand, is here and ready to kind of fill us in on what is happening with this Epstein story. So we're getting him on the horn as we speak, and he'll be joining us in a moment. You all, if you have questions for Tim or for me or any great cold remedies that you want to share, please let me know. I've been drinking a lot of tea. And here's Tim. Tim, hi.
Hey, what's up, girl? How you doing?
So nice to see you. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And, I can't keep up with this Epstein story, Tim, so I'm counting on you to fill in the blanks.
It is a crazy story. You'll be happy to know I was just on vacation last week, so I've had to catch up for a couple days myself. And I was with my most non-political friends, went dark, and one of my besties, she reads nothing, consumes nothing. She was like, I don't want to see any news where people are yelling at each other. She's like, if you just tell me something I could watch where nobody's yelling, which is obviously not my show. And I was like, are you watching Katie Couric on her Instagram or something? And she's like, I saw that she was back, so I added you one more subscriber during that
Oh,
vacation.
thank you
I just
very
want to
much,
let you
Tim.
know.
That's awfully nice of you. Well,
Anyway, I'm up to speed. I've been on this for a while because the whole thing, I never really understood why it was a right wing conspiracy in the first place, to be honest. Like Epstein obviously traveled in elite circles. So I understood why it was kind of an anti-elite conspiracy, right? Or a fact in a lot of ways, right? Like this feeling of what was happening. Like he's in these elite circles, but those elite circles included Donald Trump. And they included, obviously prominent Democrats, but also prominent Republicans and non-political people. And so when he gets arrested and then goes to jail and then dies in prison, it's during the Trump presidency in 2019, right? And so this kind of, now this is the one element of this, because I hate kind of calling it an Epstein conspiracy, because what happened to these girls was not a conspiracy. I mean, women were
and
trafficked. This is a
in
true
fact,
thing.
Tim, after we chat, David Boies is going to join me, and
Yeah.
obviously he represented a lot of the victims. So
Yeah.
I think that's his point. Like people are forgetting about the victims in all of
Yeah.
this, but like everything in our current culture, it has become like highly politicized. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is you're finally seeing some cracks in the MAGA base, right?
Right.
So let's talk about that. I mean, why? why well, I guess why are people so obsessed with this list and MAGA in particular?
So this takes us back to this 2019. He dies, and then it's like, well, he didn't kill himself, and it's a lot of MAGA-oriented people that were associated with it. Well, why, right? And the answer is that going all the way back to 2015, so 10 years now. Now this does take us. The story's hard because you kind of dip back and forth between conspiracy and real crimes that happened. But this part was the conspiracy. You remember QAnon, right?
Of
The
course.
people holding the queue and the Pizzagate and people at Comet Pizza. The MAGA base was told that there was an elite cabal, of people that were committing crimes against children and that are never held to account, and that Donald Trump was going to be the one to stop it, right? And so the Epstein story is kind of where this kind of conspiracy dips into reality, where there was somebody that was in an elite cabal of some kind that was doing crimes against young people. And so, like, the conspiracy and the reality kind of fused, right? The QAnon and the Pizzagate stuff and the Epstein stuff, like, all fused into one big narrative among Trump supporters. And so, this time when he was running, and it was a lot more of the id of Trump, right? He had a lot more of kind of, the Cash Patels around him. It's different than the first time, right? Like
Yeah.
where he really hired a lot of traditional Republicans. This time he was bringing in a lot of people from this like MAGA media conspiratorial world. And so all these folks were thinking, finally, it's going to happen. He's back in there. We're going to get the bad people. We're going to get the Democrats and the financiers and the Hollywood people that were involved in this. And so then for Trump 6 months in to say to them, well, actually, there's nothing to see there, nothing there. It's a betrayal of like this very fundamental thing that MAGA media folks, the people that consume MAGA media, had accepted as true. And so, unlike some of his other lies, right, like where he was kind of fudging about things that didn't, he was pulling the wool over the other people's eyes, the Democrats to the left or the media or whatever. In this case, I think rightly, a lot of them feel like, wait a minute, you're you're treating us like we're idiots, and now you're telling us that we need to move on. But this was part of the deal. Like, this was part of the contract. Like, you're gonna get back in there, and then we're gonna get the bad guys. And now that we're not, now you're telling us we're not, and just stupid. It's a Democratic conspiracy. Like, and so
But
I
Tim,
just
let me
think that
ask you, can I
yeah,
just ask you a quick question? I mean,
please.
it's been known for many years that Donald Trump had a relationship with Epstein, right?
Yeah.
Were the MAGA folks just okay with that? Did they think, oh well, this guy has this elite cabal of bad people hurting young women, but it's okay if our guy is a member of that
Yeah.
cabal?
Well, I think there now I'm getting really into like the anthropology of MAGA, but so we'll subsect it into three groups. There's the Trump cult crew, the like red hats, Q sign at the rally. A lot of them, I think, would tell you that Trump was in these circles because he was going to expose it, right? Like that was part of the deal, right? Like, obviously, he was pictured with Epstein. He's exposing it all from the
Oh,
inside.
that he was like undercover or something?
Yeah, this is the cultish part of the group, right?
Wow.
We're not, we can,
Okay.
I'm gonna promise, I'm gonna live up to my promise to my friend and not yell and mock. But
Okay.
so I think that's one category. And there's another category of people that that didn't really engage in this stuff that deeply. David French writes about this very well. Like, there's some MAGA people that like the media they consume, they never hear any bad info. This week might have been the first time they've seen those pictures, right? Like, because they're just in such a bubble. So that's part of it. Some folks just weren't aware. And then I think that there's this new group of Trump voters, like the manosphere types. Your Joe Rogan view, the Andrew
Charlie
Schultz, like,
Kirk.
yeah. Well, Charlie Kirk's more of a traditional MAGA. I'm thinking more like the comedian podcast
Oh, got
guys.
it.
Like those guys, Theo Vaughn, and I don't know, like, they came to this as like, well, okay, yeah, Trump knew him, and like, I don't think that he's like a secret cult guy, but like, he is going to challenge, like, he's got the ball, he's got the cojones to challenge the status quo, right? Like, and he's going to go after these guys in a way that the establishment wouldn't, because they're too weak. And I think those guys, you see, Trump is getting mocked by those guys, right? Like, his base might come around and come back to him, right? Because they have so many times before. Those guys, I've been watching some of those like comedian bro podcasts who like were really new to MAGA. Some of those guys voted for Hillary, right? Or weren't voting before and then came
Yeah.
around recently. Those guys were like, Do you think I'm stupid? Right? Like, do you think I'm stupid? Really? There was nobody else involved in this? Like, it was just Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and 1,000 young women were victims, and nobody there was there, like, so I think though that group is gonna be the one that is particularly, not buying what he's selling.
Yeah, well, maybe also the first group of Trump people who really, as you said, thought he was going to fulfill their wishes or their
Right.
fantasy of getting back to, at these people. But you know what's interesting to me is that Trump seems to be kind of okay to dismiss some of these people. He's not really placating them. In a social media post this morning, he appeared to disown his supporters who were upset. This is what he wrote: "My past in all caps, supporters have brought into this bullshit, s blank blank blank, hook, line, and sinker." He added, "Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success because I don't want their support anymore."
I think that this is really me. I'm always hesitant, Katie, because we've been doing this for so long to be like, this one's really gonna hurt Trump. Because like how many times has he risen from the dead and have people come around and forgiven him? But I don't know. My mega media consumption, the stuff that I consume to get out of my bubble is I like the Bannon War Room podcast. Bannon, say what you want about him, he's smart. We have disagree on a lot of stuff. But like I think they are genuine, right? Like some of the Charlie Kirk stuff is a little performative. I think these guys are genuine about their America First beliefs, which I disagree with. And I was listening to them this morning and watching their kind of social media content, and some of them are mad about this. And I think that it's something that could stick with them. Maybe they're not going to abandon Trump over it, but there's this loss of trust. Trump was like different from other politicians. These people thought like, well, every politician lies or whatever. Everybody's a hypocrite, but Trump is different. Trump is not a politician. And this is very politician-y behavior. And to
Yeah.
me, I think it could be something that really sticks with them where they're like, I still like Trump, whatever. I'm still America first, but I don't really trust him anymore. And I think that he's gone established, whatever the phrasing they would use. And I think that that's a line that's going to remember, that they're going to remember, that they're weaklings, that they're past supporters. I think, it is, I don't know if it's like Hillary deplorables or whatever. It's like the kind of thing that people, people don't like to be treated like that.
Yeah, Alan Dershowitz wrote a piece last night saying there's nothing to see here, folks. There's nothing in this file. It's been like redacted. What did he say? I read the whole thing last night. Do we have any quotes from? Anyway, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. But I think when I talk to David Boyes, I'm going to ask him about it. What do you
There's a
think?
great Julie Brown. I just want to shout her out. Julie K. Brown, Miami Herald. I don't know if you ever interviewed her. She was one of the key journalists on this. She wrote something yesterday for the Miami Herald, and I did a video version of it for YouTube just so people could see it. And because she answered this question, like, what are the files? What is in it? Because people think like, oh, it's like a list. It's like a list. And it's not that. But like there are a lot of FBI files that are public that are deeply redacted. You could unredact those. There were the computers that they took from his house in Manhattan. There's got to be, there's the evidence that was presented to the grand jury. So, it's not like a list like, oh, Epstein, had a little black book where he listed all the men that did bad stuff. But it's more like it's this combination of material, like how he made his money. A lot of people don't really, like, we don't really know. Like, we knew a couple of his clients, the Victoria's Secret guy, but like, so I think it's more like that, right? Which is there is others, like obviously there were co-conspirators
Well,
and there were these investigations.
Ghislaine Maxwell, somebody just mentioned her. She apparently, didn't she have a black book with like all the clients' names?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it, but like, she definitely was the organizer, though. Like, she was
Right?
like. Here's another thing that Jillian could help tell. At least one. Hey, David Boyes would know this better than me, but at least one of the young women, of the girls that was assaulted, was working at Mar-a-Lago, and so Jillian was like recruiting the girls, and then also kind of connecting
Yeah.
with some of the other financiers and some of the other people that were, assaulting them. And so whether whether she had a single book or not, she certainly knows who was involved and was
Do
a
you think
coordinator.
why hasn't she talked? I guess she's appealing her case to the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, she's in prison. It was interesting. She said that she wasn't offered a plea. And I don't like that. Now that gets outside of my wheelhouse a little bit, but like that's what she is saying. Where like, usually in this kind of situation, it'd be like, okay, the government would say, you come testify, you show us who the other people were involved, and instead of 20 years or whatever she got, 25 years, we will give you 12. Like it's
Yeah.
that like that's kind of how this stuff works. And she said she wasn't offered that, and is that because the government at the time didn't want to, go after these other powerful men. They wanted to kind of they got her and him and they wanted to move on. Was it some other reason they didn't trust her? I don't know, but that's what she says is that. So what that she implies at least she had more information to trade and they didn't want it.
Which is so interesting. I wonder if she'd ever do an interview.
It seems to me like she'd want to. I mean, and I think this is something the Democrats get to just strategy should just say that, okay, like we're gonna call her, we're gonna subpoena her to testify if we win back the House. I mean that's a long time from now, a year and a half. So
Yeah. Mike Johnson is kind of split a little bit with
yeah.
Donald Trump on this, and Marjorie Taylor Greene has done that as well. What what do you think of the Democrats, and how are they going to exploit sort of this whole situation, or how are they exploiting it?
I think that they were a little slow to the punch, but I think that it's good that they are going to talk. That they should talk about it. I think that there is ways to talk about it that kind of ties to the broader message of Democrats, which is look, Donald Trump says he was for regular people, but what has he done? He's protecting the rich and powerful that were involved with Jeffrey Epstein. He passed a tax cut for the richest people in the country and cut SNAP benefits and Medicaid for the poorest. Like I think there's a way to you kind of tuck this into that message framework that works. And then also I just think continuing to put pressure on them to give more information. The example I always give, you remember the Benghazi hearings? All the
Of
Benghazi,
course.
Republicans did 40 of those, and eventually you begin to roll your eyes. Well, people that weren't paying attention closely back then might not know that it was during like like when you say give us the Epstein files, all of the files that were turned over from Benghazi by the State Department. In one of those files, a Republican investigator saw that Hillary Clinton had a different email than they'd seen before. And that is how they realized that she had another server that was not the State Department server.
Yeah.
And that is what spiraled into the whole Hillary Clinton email scandal, whatever you think of that. And like the Jim Comey letter, right? All of that came out of a totally unrelated thing, And so if you're the Democrats, it's like, turn over every leaf here. I don't know. Maybe Trump's in the files. Maybe it's not. Maybe he's protecting one of his rich friends. Maybe he's, who knows, right? Like we don't know. But if you continue to kind of gather more information, you kind of don't know where it will go.
Yeah. I'm surprised the files haven't been leaked by anyone, or,
It's the
it
DOJ.
hasn't gotten out more. And the other thing, I was with some people who are kind of run in these kind of highfalutin legal circles over the weekend. And one theorized that there are a lot of very wealthy Republican donors who would be implicated if this file became public. And I wonder if you have heard any sort of theories about what's in there.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't have any names besides the guy that I mentioned earlier, which is already public. I'm not doing anything. The Wexner, the Victoria's Secret guy,
Yeah.
who is a Trump supporter. But to me, let's put it this way: Trump is not a guy that's shown a lot of empathy for people in the past, and he hasn't shown any empathy for these victims. But think about the Me Too era. Trump was always on the side of the accused, right? He was always like, "Oh, are they getting a bad deal? Is their reputation getting defamed?" A- and so I wouldn't be surprised if Pam Bondi came to him and said, "Here's some of the things. There are a few sensitive names in here. Here they are," and for Trump to be like, "No, I don't want to embarrass my friend so and so, like with these like accusations from these tawdry women, right?" Like, I don't anyway. I don't know that happened, but that seems very much in his character, right? Like, to me, that seems as likely as it's about him, as it's just that, like, he, because of the past accusations against him and his past behavior, feels a whatever kinship against men who he thinks are wrongly accused or might be accused in, or might be, attached to something in a way that that they don't deserve. And so I think that is a very legitimate rationale for what. And the answer is not that they don't have more information. Like, they have more information, right? So the question is, why aren't they putting it out, right?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to follow it, and I wonder if they're going to feel tremendous pressure to have to at least kind of dole some material out.
Yeah.
Is David ready?
I was kind of surprised. Yeah, we'll get to David. Just real quick. I was surprised. They just did an interview. I just saw him. He was grabbed, like, walking from a place by a reporter. And they're asked, if you'd appoint a special counsel to look into this. And I always thought that might be his out. You appoint a special counsel, they take 18 months. We'll talk to you about this in 2027. And he bristled at that very much. Was like, nope, I don't have anything to do with this. I won't do this. So I thought that was noteworthy that isn't even something that he's looking into.
Interesting.
Anyway, thanks for having me, Katie.
This story won't go away. Tim, thank you for talking to me. David Boyce is up next if you want to watch what he has to say. It might be
all right. I think I gotta go pick up my girl from guitar lessons. But I'll catch you next time.
Okay.
I'll see you soon.
Bye, Tim. Thanks. Everyone stand by. I haven't gone from one guest to another, so Julia, who works with me, is helping me. And we're going to just find David Boyce. He's actually out in California doing a deposition, and he was nice enough to say he would slip out and talk to us.
Second.
Hold on.
I have the right one. Hold on. Yep.
There we go. There he is. Is that? No?
Hold on.
Okay, and then there's a number. No? What number?
1.
Huh.
Hold on.
Maybe that is him, but he just looks younger.
Let me try one more time.
Okay. Everybody, sorry about this, but it will be worth it, I think.
Yay.
We got him.
Okay.
And he has a young, very technically savvy assistant with him, because he told me he didn't really know that much about Substack.
He got a Substack just for you.
I know. I have the best smile. You're so nice. I have such gummy smile, and I have no upper lip. Hi, David.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for slipping out of your deposition to talk to us for a moment, because
Absolutely.
It's a really interesting story. I just want to mention that David has been at the center of the Epstein case for several years, representing several of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, including Virginia Giuffre. I hope I'm saying her name right. She was one of the first young women to come forward publicly with the claim that she was trafficked by Epstein and his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell as a teenager, and was so upsetting. She took her own life earlier this year. She was 41 years old and had 3 children, and I'm so sorry. I was so sorry to hear that, David. So David is widely regarded as one of the country's most successful trial lawyers, and I think few people have as much of an understanding of the intricacies of this story than David. So I'm just curious, David, as you've watched all of this unfold and this kind of explode in the national conversation, what have you been thinking?
Well, the first thing is that there's a tremendous amount of information, documents and other information that is available, that the government has, that has not been produced, not made public, and it should be made public. We and others representing the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking have long asked to have this information made public, and it ought to be. It should have been already, and we're hopeful. I noticed that there's legislation in Congress that is now really bipartisan legislation in Congress pushing for that. So I hope that succeeds in making this stuff public.
Yeah, I think when you and I talked briefly last night, you were talking about how the victims in all of this have kind of been forgotten, and one of the people watching this mentioned that as well. Um, can you talk about the number of people you represented and the impact that this had on their young lives?
It was really horrific. Uh, my partner, Sigrid McCauley, and I represented more than 2 dozen of the victims of the sex trafficking. And these were bright, thoughtful, uh, young girls, and the effect on their lives was horrific and longstanding. Um, Although they were very strong and they managed to come out the other side, they never really escaped the consequences of that tremendous abuse and the emotional reactions from it.
You say this material should be made public. You are, you have tried to get these out in the public. Pam Bondi, the attorney general, even said it was
Yes.
waiting on her desk, waiting to get released after she reviewed it. What do you think happened, David?
It's really hard to tell. Uh, Something changed. Um, Everybody in the administration said this was going to be made public. The president talked about making it public. The FBI said it was going to be made public. The attorney general said it was on her desk waiting to be made public, and that she was committed to making it public. And then something changed. And I don't think anybody outside the administration really knows what it was or why it was. I think one of the reasons that you have as much attention to this right now, after it being really quiet, is that I think people are wondering um, what happened, what changed people's mind, um, why, if it was on the Attorney General's desk, um, ready to be produced, why wasn't it produced?
Yeah, and I'm curious. I mean, you say there's all kinds of material there. In the course of the trial, did you have access? Do you know what's in there, David, because of discovery and preparing for the case?
I know some of what's in there. Perhaps a substantial amount of what's in there. Um, some of what's in there are materials that we actually furnished to the government um, as part of our investigation and as part of our efforts to get the government to go after Epstein and his collaborators. Some of it we learned as a result of the trial. But there's also a lot of stuff in there that I don't know, that I've never seen. Um, there are the results of grand jury testimony, the results of um, what was found in Epstein's safe, what was gathered from Epstein's various residences that I have not seen. So I don't think anybody really knows what's in there. People who are who have represented Trump, who have represented Epstein, um, know some of that, perhaps more than I do. Um, and there have been some statements in interviews recently by some of those people. Um, but I know that there's a lot. I've seen a lot, but there's a lot that I have not seen. Um, all of that should have been made public a long time ago. Um,
I was going to ask you about this Wall Street Journal editorial written by, or op-ed rather, written by Alan Dershowitz. He says there's no, okay, and you can talk about why Alan Dershowitz may not be the best source on this, but he claims that there is no Epstein client list, only sealed FBI interviews with redacted names. Well, those would be pretty important. That none of the named individuals are current office holders, that any incriminated videos were only from public areas, not guest bedrooms, that Trump did nothing improper, that Epstein died by suicide, and that Epstein had no ties to intelligence agencies. What do you make of Alan Dershowitz's op-ed, David?
Well, of course, Mr. Dershowitz is, as he's indicated, has been President Trump's lawyer. I think that he also says in there, it's not President Trump's fault, it's the court's fault. Um, uh, I think that the Attorney General, the FBI, have a lot of materials that they can release. No court is blocking that from being released. So I would not. I think you ought to accept what Mr. Dershowitz says as a argument by a lawyer on behalf of his client. In addition, um, I don't have any reason to believe that Mr. Dershowitz has seen everything. Now, he represented both Mr. Trump and represented Mr. Epstein. So he probably does have information that I don't have. But I don't have any reason to believe he's seen the FBI files. I don't have any reason to believe he's seen what was in Epstein's safe. I don't have any reason to believe that he's seen the grand jury testimony. So I think that, again, regardless of your party and regardless of who you represent, I think the American people have a right to know what's there. Now, one of the reasons they may be holding it back is that we've been very critical of the government for not going after Epstein's collaborators, not going after the people who participated in the sex trafficking. The government went after Epstein and Maxwell and then stopped. And Epstein and Maxwell could not have acted alone. Their sex trafficking at the scope and scale that it was could never have taken place without many participants and many collaborators. And those people should be held to account as well. And perhaps one of the reasons that the government is holding back is a desire to protect government people who did not go after some of these collaborators and some of these participants.
Somebody just asked, and I was going to ask you this question too, but I guess this would put them in some legal hot water, which is, why don't the victims identify the people themselves?
Well, of course, one of the reasons is that each of the victims knows the people, and not even all times do they know the identity of the people. And many of the victims are no longer with us. Many of the victims don't want to revisit this in any way. When individuals have come forward, they've been intimidated. They're frankly scared of the consequences. Epstein and his collaborators were and are wealthy, powerful people. These are individuals without any real means of support or protection. So I think that asking these people to come forward, many of them have. Many of them with great courage have come forward. You mentioned Virginia Giuffre, who was really driven to her death by what happened to her and by the constant attacks on her, even after Epstein was convicted. So many of these young women have shown enormous courage in coming forward. But this is a powerful set of people, and people have concerns and legitimate concerns about their safety.
How many people are we talking about who would be implicated in this whole thing, David?
Well, first of all, the government has identified maybe 6 or 8 or 10 key people who they never prosecuted, who were identified as co-conspirators by the government of with Epstein. Ordinarily, the government would go after the co-conspirators of a sex trafficking operation. For some reason, they didn't here.
Why do you think they didn't?
Well, in the beginning, I think it was political influence, and I think the sweetheart deal that Epstein got in 2006 and 2007 and 2008 was clearly a product and part of political influence. I think that in part it was the consequence of our justice system. People who are rich and have a lot of ability to hire expensive lawyers do a lot better than people who don't. I think that part of it too was that many of the victims were not of the same social class as prosecutors and of the media. The media really failed these women as much as the prosecutors did. Um, we spent years trying to get the media to pay attention to this. We filed public lawsuits. Um, we recovered money for the individuals, but still the media ignored this story, essentially, with a few exceptions, like Julie Brown, who was mentioned earlier. So both the media and the prosecutors, and really our society, failed these young women. And I think we continue to fail them by not holding to account Epstein's collaborators and the participants.
Well, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the co-conspirators or collaborators, but, what about the clientele, if you will? What do you know? Obviously, this was a very connected, rich group of people. And that's what I was curious about. How many people are we talking about that would be implicated in this whole thing in terms of people who, uh, you know, were with some of these young women or paid Epstein to be with these young women, or these women were provided to by Epstein?
Well, we know that there were dozens, a lot, um, and we know that one of the things that Epstein did was he threatened um, these young women with his powerful contacts, and we also know that there were tapes that Epstein took. Now we don't know where those tapes are. Um, uh, I can't tell you for certain that the government has any of those. Um, but
Where do you, if the government doesn't have them, do you think they were destroyed? I mean, where do you think some of this material is?
they could have been destroyed. They could have been taken by somebody and held for blackmail purposes. Um, there's a lot we don't know, and the reason for that is that the government really dropped the ball on this. Um, uh, they didn't pursue this in the way that you would expect them to. When the government identifies people by name as co-conspirators in sex trafficking, you expect the government to go after those people. They didn't. When private counsel like us went to the government and identified people with evidence, you expect them to go after it. Um, uh, and and this was a bipartisan problem. Um, the um, the U.S. Attorney Berman for the Southern District of New York was one of the few people who actually stepped up and was going after Epstein and his collaborators. And then he was fired. Um, uh, and
He'd be interesting to talk to.
He'd be very interesting to talk to. Um, and then the Biden administration came in, and uh, and they didn't. In 4 years, we couldn't convince the Biden administration um, to go after the participants, the people who had sex with these young girls, the collaborators and co-conspirators. We couldn't convince them.
Why do you think the Biden administration refused to get involved?
Katie, I just don't know. We
Do you think
started
there were
this.
high-profile Democrats in this situation, perhaps?
There could have been. This was look, this was not a Republican sex trafficking operation or a Democratic sex trafficking operation. This was a sex trafficking operation that pulled in people of all parties. This was the one common threat was that these were people that were rich and powerful, um, and uh, and the other common threat is nobody's going after them. Uh, so I think that when you have this kind of conspiracy, you have sex trafficking at the scope and scale. Um, you've got to ask yourself why would nobody go after them? We started bringing this to the attention um, during the Obama administration. Um, we got no traction. Um, then early in the first Trump administration, um, we got some traction under Mr. Berman. Um, then when he was gone, um, there were really no new investigations. Nobody was gone after other than Maxwell and Epstein himself. Um, then the Biden administration came in, we made no progress with them. Then the Trump administration came back in power, and they haven't gone after anybody either. Um, so this has been a bipartisan failure to protect the most vulnerable people in our society and to hold to account the people who have abused them.
I know you have to go with it, told you have a heart out, but I guess
Mm.
the final question, David, is can anything be done? I mean, I guess, Trump has total immunity given to him by the Supreme Court, and he seems to be supporting Pam Bondi, and I know that there's a movement on Congress, something called a discharge petition,
Yes.
which allows any member of the House to force legislation on the floor if a majority of House members, 218, sign on. And according to the New York Times, this guy from Kentucky named Thomas Massey, a frequent Trump critic, a Republican, says he has the support of at least 6 Republicans. So, could they somehow, is there a legislative solution to this or any kind of legal solution to force their hand to produce this material?
Yes, I think there is a legislative solution. I also think that I don't want to make a prediction that's going to be proven false immediately, but I think President Trump, when he really focuses on this, is going to believe that the American people deserve transparency. Um,
We
uh,
also might realize that politically he is going to be in hot water because so much of the MAGA world is upset about this.
I think that's also possible, but I really, when you're president of the United States, you obviously have many things to be concerned about and focus on, and I just don't believe he's focused on this issue, perhaps the way he might have. And I think I think one of the good things that's happening now with all this publicity is I think it will force him to focus on this. And I think when he focuses on this, I think he will believe that the right thing to do is to uh, make this stuff public.
I don't know. It doesn't seem like he's really moved by the right thing to do that often, David Boys, it seems to
And
me. So we'll see. Listen, I know you have to get back to your deposition. Thank you so much for spending some time talking with us, and let's stay in touch.
absolutely. Good to talk to you.
Okay,
Nice to see
thanks,
you again.
David.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so Tim Miller, David Boys, I hope this was helpful, interesting. I learned a lot. I'm not as deeply entrenched in this whole story as some people are, but it clearly, as we said earlier, is not going to go away, and it has all sorts of legal and political ramifications. Please let me know what you all think. Consider me your conduit to people involved in this story. If I can get them to talk with me and spend some time with all of us helping to produce some clarity. I'm going to try to do that. Um, I think that's it for now. And this is our first time we tried to do a bit of a show with more than one guest. Let us know what you think, what you want to hear from me, what you want to see here on this platform. As you know, I'm kind of new to Substack and I'm still kind of finding my way, but I want to be of service, as cheesy as that sounds, to you all and use any kind of experience and contacts I have to help illuminate all that's going on in this crazy world of ours. So please let me know what you think. And thanks so much for spending some time with me this afternoon. I'm now going to gargle with salt water and get some ginger and lemon from the grocery store and honey and make a big concoction of tea. And I'll see you guys next time. So thanks a lot. Bye.